Terry Taylor's 27 and has had an intense interest in light aeroplanes since the days of his childhood, when he watched his father, the late John Taylor, design and build two of the world's smallest aeroplanes. John Taylor was a mechanical engineer in the late 40s and had a fascination for things that flew. Model aeroplanes gave him a temporary outlet while he worked hard to get his private pilot's license and study the design and construction of real planes. He even took his wife-to-be courting in a Tiger Moth. This unique story in the history of aviation begins with the Mono, a single-seater monoplane, John Taylor's first design. When you live in a first-floor flat of a small house in Ilford and you want to build a plane, then something has to give. And in John's case it was the normal style of family life, such as Sunday tea time, which was flexed a bit to allow the flying machine to take shape on the living room floor. 23 years on and Terry tries the cockpit of the later Titch design, and he can't help but remember his childhood days when he explored the wonders of the embryonic Mono. In those early post-war days of rationing and red tape, it was hard enough to start any material-intensive job, let alone build a plane. John completed the design of his aeroplane, named the Mono, in 1954, but it wasn't until 4 years later, in 1958, that the go-ahead was given to build it. John's wife Eve was tolerant and patient as by the spring of 1959 the airframe neared completion and had passed its inspections. The unusualness of the activity even attracted the TV newsreels of the day.
And how long did it take you to build this one?
15 months so far on actual construction, and I would estimate about another 2 months roughly to finishing the complete project.
And then how are you going to get it out of here?
Oh, it'll go quite easily through the window. We take the centre bay out, and then the fuselage and the other various components will go through quite easily.
Well, Mrs. Taylor, what's it been like living with bits of aeroplane all around the house?
Well, after just over a year, I have got used to it.
Aren't you a bit hurt that you didn't build a two-seater?
No, it's just that if we had a bigger room, perhaps we would have done.
The time had come when almost all the work was completed and the Mono could see the light of day. Many a neighbour had puzzled at the almost incessant sawing and knocking from number 46, but not half as amazed as they were on the day that the Mono, piece by piece, emerged from an upstairs window. The first flight was to be made from White Waltham Airfield several miles away, and so the Mono made its first journey by road in a furniture van. The test pilot was World War II veteran Titch Holmes. The Mono had to be put through its paces, and Wing Commander Titch, a World War II Spitfire pilot, regarded the task of flying this first-floor fantasy with great enthusiasm. Titch Holmes later likened the Mono's handling to that of the Spitfire, something that just about all aeroplane designers had certainly liked to hear. By 1963, several Monos were flying, and a good many more under construction. The most common request was for details of the fitting of a larger engine to replace the Mono's standard 1.5-litre Volkswagen Beetle car engine. John's only and characteristic answer was not to modify the Mono, but to start planning a new aeroplane, designed around engines in the 100 horsepower class. By the summer of 1964, the new machine, called the Tiger Cub, was planned in some detail. In recognition of the excellent work done by Titch Holmes in improving his earlier aircraft, John decided to rename the Tiger Cub the Titch, the name which the design still carries to this day. John decided to give his Titch the look of a fighter and had to seek the authority of the Ministry of Defence before embarking on a camouflage and roundel scheme. With Southend Airport only 3 miles away from the garage in which the Titch was born, there was little trouble in getting the aeroplane to the runway. The back garden provided the final assembly area for the tiny aeroplane. With a lift from the neighbours, the Titch was out on the road and on its way down Southend Arterial Road to Kent Elms Corner. John's battle to get his homemade plane into the air wasn't just one of cramped space and twisted plywood. It was also one against the bureaucracy. John's plane was estimated to have the potential to do £2 million worth of damage should it land somewhere unexpected. It took the indemnity of 27 separate companies to cover it for its first flight. A left-hand turn at the lights and through the back roads brought the Titch into Aviation Way and onto the airport. The aeroplane was designed for home construction, and today's builders have the choice of constructing racing or touring versions. By the summer of 1964, the new machine was planned in some detail, and John was invited to enter the design into a competition for midget racer aeroplanes. The aeroplane would have been far from light enough to be a racer, and John put in several months of frantic work into redesigning the airframe to reduce the weight. The efforts were well worthwhile, and John carried off a second prize in an entry of more than 40. John Taylor was a proud man this day in 1966 when he tried out the cockpit for size while young Terry looked on. Engine problems delayed the first flight until January the 4th, 1967. A week later, the Titch was in fine fettle and ready to perform for the cameras. The Titch's weight was kept down by not fitting a starter motor, so the young Terry, then 12, sat inside to operate the switches, while his dad swung the prop to fire the engine. During test flying, the Titch was limited to a 10-mile radius from Southend Airport, but that was plenty of room for an aeroplane as manoeuvrable as this. After the usual test flying, the Taylor Titch became an officially approved and splendid little flying machine.
How'd you go, Mr. Taylor?
Oh, very well indeed, thank you.
What about handling? Any problems?
No, I don't visualise any at all. Pleasantly surprised. Very light, of course, very responsive, but I don't foresee any modifications being required.
And what next?
Well, of course, we've got the test programme to go through to get the full permit, and then once this is complete, I'll get rid of this one and on with the next.
In May of 1967, while flying the Titch over Essex, John Taylor lost his life. No satisfactory explanation has ever been given for the sad accident, and the accident branch of the Royal Aircraft Establishment cleared the aeroplane of any fault. Like the Mono, many Titches have been built and are flying today. John Bygraves constructed his own and keeps it at Old Warden in Bedfordshire. He bought the aeroplane as a half-completed project in 1972, and it took him 2 years to get it into flying condition. He's been flying the aeroplane regularly since 1974.
The Taylor Titch, in fact, is not my first home-built aircraft. It was the second aircraft that I built, the first one being a Dream Turbulent, although of similar size. As regards the construction of the Taylor Titch, I would compare it favourably with any other construction for that size aircraft, with plywood and high-quality spruce. It's really very much like building a larger version of a model aircraft, whereas you transfer the scale of the drawing onto a building board and then build on top of the drawing and make the whole thing up stage by stage as like building a model aircraft. The Titch took me, I think, about five years to build, but I dare say it could have been built in a lot less time. It depends on how much time and effort you wish to devote to this. I made a point of saying, right, 10 hours a week was what I set out to do. It took me therefore 5 years of about 2,200, 500, something like that, hours to build. I think it could have easily been condensed. There's no reason why this aircraft shouldn't be attempted by the novice builder for the first timer. The plans are accurate. About 14 times. It won't start. It's just to get the fuel up into the carburettor to prepare it ready for starting then, you see. So we just keep turning it over. is a good warming up speed. The aircraft itself has got flaps. Now this is an option, not a necessity, but a nice option. In fact, the aeroplane is so clean that it's nice to be able to select full flap on your landing flare. More like an air brake perhaps, although of course it does give you about 10 miles per hour less landing speed. Very safe. I climb at 1,500 feet a minute. It would climb faster, but the propeller combination that I have on my Continental 0200 gives me a generally good all-round performance. I like going places. I went abroad last year. I went to Holland. I went to Belgium and France. It'll cover the ground quickly. I cruise at 160 miles per hour. It's just like flying any small light aircraft. Perfectly happy. It's as you want it. Make it as you want it. Fast or docile and forgiving. It's like any other aircraft or sport for that matter. Treated sensibly, the aircraft is safe. And I'd have no hesitation in recommending it to any pilot who's suitably trained in how we describe tail dragger aircraft. It's wonderful, wonderful experience. I get nearly as much satisfaction out of seeing the aircraft being flown by other people as I do flying it myself. Tremendous, absolutely tremendous.
More ambitious in the do-it-yourself field is John Taylor of Ilford. He designed and built his own plane, and at Whitewater Airfield he got ready to see it go off for the first time. But that's not all. At his Ilford home, John built the machine inside the house. Getting it out to be taken to the aerodrome was the best thing his neighbors had seen for a long time. The engine was easy. It was brought down the stairs. But the fuselage very nearly had to be left behind. After that, the house must have seemed quite empty. Back at the airfield, the great moment had come. It was a triumph. But the pilot was not John Taylor, because before the plane could be insured, it had to be flown by a test pilot. The owner-builder will have to wait another 3 weeks before he can fly it himself. He went to hear the verdict. 100% said Titch Holmes. That must have been music in John's ears.